Okay. Is this working? I think so. We just started stream. I just started like an hour late today.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
hello.
Hello.
Okay. All right. So this today is just getting back into like a rhythm a little bit, and then oh, good. Jamie's in the chat. Hi, Jamie. Um, so I did a ballet intensive, which was really cool, like really, really cool, and kind of got me a little bit more mentally good because yeah, I need to dance or I would go crazy. Um, and yeah, just processed stuff, life, being neurodivergent, all that stuff. I was going to talk more about the digital neighborhood thing because I'm going to have some like neighborhood meetings about it this week for sure, and then we'll start figuring out a timeline for what to do and who I need to talk to because we need to start asking people to help us to build it. And what else? Instagram is going well. People have responded to. I have like 50,000 views on a video about my research that I'm working on and my some of my theories about the bee building arriving is interlaced in that, so that's been good. But I talked about suicidal ideation and like maladaptive daydreaming, and that I actually think it's a sign that people with basically like the building motivation are like unable to tolerate being in these environments and not have access to the ability to actually like develop their skills and participate in all of the interesting things that their brain is trying to think about. So that's good. It resonates with a lot of people. Uh, so I think that kind of says it's just probably right. Like besides that, I think logically it follows. Um, it's just it's a this is a really difficult time to be alive. Uh, and I spent the week with like how to explain ballet quickly. So Vaganova training is from Russia. Okay, Russian training is very uh liberated in how they approach things because even though the government is a mess, the arts are pretty much working from mentor to mentee to mentor to mentee, and and it doesn't get stuck. So one of the teachers there was like an older guy who was originally from Italy, but he trained in Vaganova, and he was saying that like France is more conservative in ballet, but the country's more free. Russia is way more conservative and not free, but in ballet they're free. And I'm like, I totally know what you're saying. Um, and America has similar problems, but like our we're conserving like puffs of smoke. Like we really don't have anything that worked in the first place to quote unquote conserve. It's all abuse. So it's so bad. And being able to see it is overwhelming, and being able to understand that I can see it because of my disability slash my autism is overwhelming. And then there's the whole thing of like, don't call it a disability, but it is. um, yeah, it's just a lot. Like having a different set of things I can see and can't see is proving to be uh, a lot of responsibility the older I get, and the more my world around me is like uh, needs this perspective, or else it's in so much trouble. And like, yeah, I don't know. So that gets to me every now and then. But dancing is nice, and Vaganova is extremely logical. And also, that's how you're able to be so expressive and successful when you learn that technique as a dancer. It's like you're not fighting physics, you're not fighting reality. You're working with it, and your body can then continue to grow instead of getting stuck. Because if you, oh, I don't know, how do I explain this? Like, this is what I think I should say. So, like, doing is building, doing is arriving. They're not like antithetical to each other. It's just a description of reality, and if we make it antithetical, it creates serious problems. So if I build something really well, it should be able to arrive more successfully because it's obeying physics. So it's kind of like you're making your what do they call those little cars that they race? Matchbox? No. Kids do this. Derby, whatever, little derby cars or whatever the heck they're called. Anyways, but so if you're gonna build it and you're gonna race it, like the building part allows the race part to make any sense. So that's ultimately what we should approach things as, is like, okay, that's fine that you're going to have some arrival stuff, but it has to be built in order for that to be safe and not, set people on fire. But if you have this like doing as arriving mindset, it starts to say, well, won't I arrive more consistently if I make sure everybody else's engines explode? I'm like, uh, yeah, but why then? Like, why are we trying to arrive if the whole point is just to get there, and the way that you got there doesn't matter? It just doesn't make any sense. So yeah. And then the only other thought I had was I had a really funny interaction well, I thought it was really funny. Somebody on Instagram, like a lot of people on Instagram that were like white racist men, got mad because the reels showed them a video that I made just offhanded because I do that, and they didn't like the message that I had because it was about them being racist and stuff. But one of them got really weird and was commenting on other videos, and then commented on another person as well that said they were kind of stalking them. So I went in and was like, okay, well, now I'm going to stand up against this guy. And then it turned into me narrating what he was doing as like, dear diary, da 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 da, and what he was saying. And then he was like, oh, you have to have the last word, so I'm going to stay. And I just kept doing it to him until he gave up and just put like some chat GPT stuff. And then I don't know, I thought I'm not doing this justice, but I thought I did a really good job because it was really funny to me and just clowning on this person. But it was really interesting because he thought in his impulsive rage that he could keep it up. And I'm like, see, this is the valuable lesson. Sometimes you feel one way, and then later you'll feel a different way. And you can't sustain doing the thing if you're only doing it because you feel a certain way in the moment, that it is resolving your feelings. And then later on, it will not resolve those feelings anymore because your feelings have changed and your needs have changed. So this is what we need to teach people, is that like your feelings are supposed to indicate what you need and what you want to do and why. And then you're supposed to like communicate that. And if people say no to you, you then like accept the no and just move on, and maybe ask a different person or talk to yourself or whatever. And if people say no and it's not fair, then you have to unpack that for a little while. And that's what being mature and responsible for yourself as a human is. It's, yeah, I don't know. So those are all my thoughts. I guess tomorrow President Trump is going to try to like kick all homeless people out of DC or something. I don't know. So that might explode finally. Feels like we're sitting on a tinderbox a little bit. I think, I'm not even sure what's happening. Um, I kind of just, I want whatever bad thing is going to happen. Like, I don't really want a bad thing to happen, but since it's not stopping, I'm like, can we just get it over with? Like, wherever the breaking point is, can we finally just get there? If we're not going to stop it, can we just do it and then, you know, just get out of this and like declare it as treason and just get out of this whole freaking nightmare? And those are all my thoughts, and I will begin my HCAT stuff in a second. But yeah. I also think I'm going to teach some fitness classes finally online. I think I'm going to start doing that. Um, and then I might do like a buy donation thing if people want to help support my existence, because I'm going to have to do a little bit of that here and there, I think, even though I don't care for it. And I want to be post money. I don't want to do it anymore. Resistance bands and cherry yoga are quite good for group. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Well, Jamie, I've developed this method over time that's like a fascial conditioning that the idea is to teach you how to like feel your weight root into gravity by allowing the fascia to expand, and then these different layers of fascia, when they're opening up, will allow the fascia in the rest of the chain to continue to accept weight. So you can kind of like extend in two directions because you've got an anchor through layers of fascia, and you can kind of feel what that's like. It's like a pouring sensation, or like kind of like if you can imagine like wax melting and pouring into like cheesecloth or something that's a little bit givey. There's a feeling to it that's distinct, and I'm always working on like finding it and being able to talk about it because I can visually see it. I think most people can. Like if you watch someone do it, ballet, they do it. You can sort of figure out, okay, that's feeling like this in my body and it's giving the same kind of look, even if you can't sustain it as long, or it's a little bit difficult to find it again the first couple times. You can start to get better. It's like a skill of like figuring out how to work with gravity and these connective tissues. And I mean, it's really there, and there is science to back it up, but you don't necessarily have to have it all explained, perfectly before you start to work on it. That's what my experience has been. But yeah, it's like fascial conditioning. And I do know about chakras, and I learned about chakras because of one of my dance teachers who was Alvin Ailey. Um, she like danced with his company and was one of his last like muses before he died. And she talked a lot about that. I like it. There's some aspects of it that I think need to be reorganized according to modern science, but there is this idea of like arches in the body and fascial nets that kind of act like trampolines. So there's like your diaphragm kind of has that trampoline effect. The roof of your mouth does, the top of your skull, the even the sinuses. So like when you get to the roof of the mouth and like the palate, you even have like a sinus pocket that you could use. Like that's what singers are doing with their head voice, and like yeah, like resonance chambers in your skull. So you can work with like domes and then fascia that kind of like suctions up into the dome. So you can do arches, pelvic floor, diaphragm, your soft palate, bridge of the nose, and then top of the skull. And it's pretty close to the chakras. So it's like possibly that's an awareness of those fascial doming sort of behaviors. But I need to investigate that a little bit more and spend some more time studying from people who that's been their, bread and butter in movement, to see what they think it is. And I don't really believe in the word intuitive. Like, it's not like an intuitive sense. I don't like that because of how it gets situated. I understand what people can mean by intuitive, so I won't knock the word that much. But I would rather say that there's stuff that's sensed without a good explanation, but that you have like an embodied memory of, so you can reference it, even if the wording to get to the reference of that memory is a little bit difficult. But that can also create communication problems. So then you have to clarify, like, well, what are we really talking about, so it doesn't become too esoteric and unmoored from some material reality, and then it can become, easily warped into something that doesn't reference a material state that you have an embodied memory of. Some of these things verge on pseudoscience or elements. Yeah, exactly. That's basically what I'm describing, is when you fall into like pseudoscience, or it's like it's too vague and it becomes shifting topics that, like, really, if we start to do good category like a methodology of categories or category theory that we're applying. If you are working for reasonable categories, you can start to like undermine that work if you don't start to clarify what exactly are you talking about and leave it vague. And that can create in our super competitive money-based society opportunities for people to grift, opportunities for people to pretend that you don't get it because you're not good enough, yada yada, hierarchy, schmierarchy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to be a little suspicious when they're charging money, and then yeah, you don't know. And it's so hard because like people in the arts or in the movement arts are not going to be paid well, so there is reasons for us to have to do that, to charge money, but then like how much do you charge, how do you charge, and when does the line get crossed where that's starting to mess up with with the intentions that you have. And I really struggle with that because I don't feel like I have the resources that I really should to even give what I think would be the best I could give. So it's a very gross double bind to be in. I don't think there actually is a solution to it because you can't be honest about it. That's what's disturbing to me. You have to always pretend that like a fixed growth mindset, you have these fixed personality traits or fixed characteristics of like you are the great teacher, but nobody starts out as a great teacher. That's not how that works. I mean, great teachers have to figure things out. So everyone's always learning and practicing. Yeah, they might try to decide we are dumb or won't. Yeah. Exactly. They might target people might target the neurodivergent because we are genuinely looking for help and we genuinely really need help and they may not understand why we're so keen to get help is because we're disabled and it's hard to get people to believe or understand the kind, even when they do believe that we have a disability, the kind and the nature of it, they don't understand. So we don't get a lot of compassion or we don't get consideration made when it would be most appropriate to. And we can even get considerations imposed when it's not appropriate. So it's all out of sync and out of whack and it's all the time. So it really does wear on you, even though I don't think it's malicious. I think sadistic, mean people will act like it's malicious to, or like the world is malicious towards us to freak us out, but that's just to exploit the situation. Not It's not really a deep insight. The deeper insight is that, like, I think a lot of people would really like to work with us. They just don't know how, and they don't realize um, how much they're having to compensate for, right? Because of this, like, it's just exploitation on exploitation on exploitation. And it sucks because it makes it hard for people to stop and think about this and takes charge of the situation together. Like we can't do it alone. We have to actually work together. And I think that's maybe what will let me think about this as optimistically as I can. Like what could change the trajectory that our species is barreling towards? It's realizing that like the the characteristic we need to cultivate is being able to work together, and that will also be proof of who can do it or not. Like, can you work with other people? And it's hard to fake being able to work with other people, like genuinely. That's why the hierarchy thing works the way it does, is they don't have to prove that they can work well with other people because they just say like, who do you think I am? Who do you think you are? Da 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 da. Um,
I think
so
like
yeah.
if you're looking at it from a historical, anthropological perspective,
Hmm.
what um what might change the trajectory might be like I'm thinking about cases like you had the Black Death, right?
Hmm.
In Europe. And then basically what that happened, like you had like a mass pandemic, it resulted in the death of a hell of a lot of people. And it was then that like the organizing, you had the peasants' revolts, right? Basically, yeah, there was like a huge uprising, and then they took it up with the lords and the nobility in different kingdoms, and they got a lot more freedoms, and like their labor was worth a lot more. But And then you had some similar things happen. I think it's like following the First World War in Spain as well, right? And then they almost set up anarchist communes, but then they were brought down by communists from Russia. But then that's the whole other thing. The point is that I think people have to, they only come together when they realize, well, first off, I think material conditions have to be very bad. And then they have to realize that they have more power just individually. And then they get together in order to overcome, I think, like the fear factor that if you were just by yourself going to, um, kind of like, I guess, if you were in a abusive household, and let's say like you were like, everybody was terrorized by the same person,
Hmm.
if obviously everybody's afraid to just sort of speak up by themselves because they're going to obviously get made an example of, right?
Yeah.
And it's obviously a lot easier to, for a bully to kind of just uh, fight against one person and
Hmm.
invalidate them and gaslight and make all that stuff. But I think, yeah, people have to kind of realize that, oh, we're all affected really badly by the same circumstances.
Yeah.
And it, unfortunately, I think has to like result in damage that's beyond the pale, to the point that somebody kind of, it's has lost too much, and then it starts off this chain reaction,
Yes,
maybe.
and yeah, I think that I also think when something's painful and your brain has enough time to forget about it, you can start to like question your own understanding of what happened, right? Like, how did I get hurt? Was I really hurt? Did it just feel painful, but it wasn't really me getting hurt? Am I bad?
Yeah.
So you can try to do some reality testing, and if the society around you isn't encouraging that, you can go for a while, I think, without being able to say, oh no, this is really hurting me. But right now, the hurt is
Well,
so
you forget,
frequent.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's hard, and it's getting, that's the thing. It's like, I think they don't understand there's a limit. The people that are pushing the system forward, I really don't think they know that there's a limit for how long you can go where you push person to painful thing to painful thing to painful thing before it's just like that's so outrageous they
I
can't
think,
adjust to it.
yeah, I think that's specifically why. So here's the thing, right? Even like during, I think, Saturnalia, and like, in the heyday of the Roman Empire, they'd have like those types of festivals where like, you see, you would find festivals like Saturnalia very useful during extreme times of tension and stability. Basically, what happened was they'd switch the social classes for a day. Like, if you're a slave, you get to act with the master, right? And like the masters obviously can. Basically everything was kind of switched, right, or whatever, and
Hmm.
then it was like needed by the powers that be as kind of like a safety valve, pressure kind of offlet sort of thing. But that way, it's like you kind of release a little bit of tension, right? It's kind of, I guess, like in an abusive situation, like
Hmm.
the abuser kind of either love bombs or kind of there's like a good spell for a while, right? And then that's how they kind of prolong the situation.
Yeah, then they're also they're making it harder for you to tell other people your version of the story or a different version of the story besides the one that they give you, which is why nations are
Oh, right,
using
of course, because
propaganda.
they'll point, yeah, they'll point to these moments, and then
Hmm.
like if God forbid, like you actually go in and try to sort of like look at other families, other environments to try to
Hmm.
compare or speak to them about your situations, like the person who's abusing you might be like, well, actually, no, it's not so bad. Look at all these good times that we shared. Look at
Yeah.
like these moments. Don't you remember these? Like,
Yeah. Here's
yeah.
the nice things that I did for you that you didn't even ask me to do, so maybe they
I
aren't even
can't
that
possibly
nice.
be like, yeah, mean. I can't possibly
Yeah.
have any negative intentions towards you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, I'm gonna pop into something in chat too and tie it to that a tiny bit. So, let me see here. Let me go back up for a second. Jamie was adding about that. Yeah, the livable wage is getting lost to everyone at this point. So that's, I mean, that's kind of the positive is like, even though it's happening to neurodivergent people at this crazy rate, it's spreading really quickly to the general population. Okay, so intrigued by communism might be the sort of next step after capitalism, and interested in reading more about the processes by which Marx proposes we get there. So the problem with Marx, from my understanding, he's a man of his time, and there's aspects of what he believes that are arguments about human nature that I don't think are true. So that's why I would say, like, if you do look at it, you want to pay attention to feminist critiques, Black American critiques would be really interesting as well. But also, like, look at what he's proposing about human nature and behavior and what they will do in certain conditions. I don't think he's got that right. So his steps out of capitalism are probably not accurate because his whole model of the brain isn't accurate. So that's why I have less interest in what he proposed, because he had major issues with what he thought human nature was. It's been a little while since I sat down and looked at that. So it's not super fresh, but I can tell you I like pretty much was like, nope, 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 dismissed. So he's got some stuff really wrong about the human brain individually and collectively. But also, I don't think that's the only way for us to come up with what to do next, even though he's got a model that I understand has some utility predictively, but I don't think the underlying explanations for why those predictions happened or not is true. I don't think he's got that. I don't think that is where it needs to be. So, like, for example, like, I would go so far as to critique money itself. That's where I'm ending up. Is that like, well, but why are the rewards for things in the public life put into these boxes when all of it relies on things that are happening in these private spheres where people do not get paid for that reproductive work? It's weird. It's actually like super weird, and we haven't unpacked that. So I think the more important thing, if you ask me, is that we need to hear from half of the planet that doesn't end up in positions of construction of culture at the level of the public sphere, and is constructing culture in the private sphere, but even when they do,
Wait,
they're not allowed to say so.
you say half, but isn't it more like 99% of the population
Women,
though?
you have to look at women. So 50% of
Mm,
the population of the earth, and this goes across different, like, regional you know differences in belief and how capitalism is being applied. If you do not have women as leaders, you will not get out of this, and Marx doesn't have an understanding of that, let alone other groups. But if you just say women, you will cover enough ground, and then if you need to extend that border a little bit further out, you can, because now there's reasons to, which we are all, I think, aware of in this space. But you have to start from there, and if you don't, it's not going to work, because the primary thing is, like,
yeah.
your mom didn't get paid for being your teacher, your whatever, everything that she was doing for you, nutritionist, blah, 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 blah. Like,
Mhm.
that doesn't get paid, but what does? Stocks. So
I
it's,
agree with
yeah,
you, but
yeah,
still, my point is that like it's I still feel it is the vast majority of the population, men or women, throughout history till the present, they don't get adequately paid for their labor,
yeah. But
and
that's,
that's
well,
just the accepted reality.
that's the question, though. It's like, but payment itself was already a flawed concept, right? Do you see
Yeah,
what
of
I'm,
course.
yeah. So okay,
Yeah,
they
well,
don't,
yeah, but that's
can't,
because of reality that people live in hierarchical structures, right?
yeah, well, and payment itself already assumed that whatever it is women are doing shouldn't be rewarded with coins. Because also,
Yeah,
when money was first invented, you could substitute women for money. You could pay the temple in women. So you got to
you
think
could, but
about
I
that.
mean, again, but at the same time, like also slaves
Yeah,
predominantly
yeah,
were,
slaves too.
also they were men too.
Slaves too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a very different relationship. Like, what, why, and
Mm,
the woman thing, I believe, when I was looking at this, was actually prior to the slave thing. That you had, like,
right.
temple prostitutes that would you could
Mm,
and you could also even exchange goods for a temple prostitute.
yeah, yeah. I guess that kind of like continues with the idea of courtesans in like imperial China, where you could
Yeah.
also just like buy them with different sales and stuff like that. But I
Right.
mean, again, it goes back to property and the notion of like who has the power and like what sort of like what's the distribution of like weight and value to things,
Yeah.
and then they just kind of like they have a completely wrong way of seeing it.
Well, and then okay, so and then for me, what I would say about like the distinction between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, I here's what I would say. So this is why I ended up with doing as willing, doing as arriving. So I believe that doing as arriving makes people pathological when it's like overseeded and it's growing in their brain to the exclusion of doing as building. I think in lower classes, this creates potentially criminals that will do violent crimes. Okay, so like homicidal people. In the upper classes, I think they might actually have a more similar psychology to the homicidal person with like low impulse control sorts of issues. But we can't study them because of their position in the world. So I would say that they are extreme doing as arriving that has been um, shaped by the specifics of the institutionalized sort of existence that they've had, where they don't really live in the real world, they don't really experience cause and effect. So when I think about analyzing class, I think class creates a neurological bias towards a pathological development that is it's pathological because it's not stable. So if you have too much doing as arriving, it's too destructive and it doesn't allow things that are stable to either remain stable because they'll have to tear it apart or to get more stable because that would require you to stop and build and observe. So it limits wonder and curiosity. So if somebody's in the proletariat class, they won't be able to use their wonder and curiosity because they don't have the materials to build with nor the time, right? And they may not even be
Yeah.
healthy enough to do it. And then the people in the very upper societies don't do it because that's not how they establish this pecking order. The pecking order is established by being really sensitive to this doing as arriving reward pathway. And they're using it so excessively, it's basically like addiction. It's like an extreme impulse control disorder that becomes, I think, psychosis. So, like, I would rather view it in terms of like a psychotic class exposing all of us to their psychosis and making us all, I guess, accountable for the problems that are created by their psychosis. So that distinction then cuts a little bit deeper, in my opinion, than saying like because what can happen with Marx or any male philosopher so far, and this is the problem with male supremacy, is they will make an us and them that's hierarchical in some way, and there's still like a moral hierarchy implied. I don't think that a neuropsychological developmental problem is a moral thing, and that's super hard for us to wrap our heads around, right? I tried to talk about this, and that's why I left TikTok, because somebody didn't understand what I was saying and thought it was something else, and then thought it was something else entirely. And I was like, whoa, I gotta go. I can't deal with people misunderstanding this point. The point that I need to make is very, very specific. When you take a group of people and say that they are morally superior to another, you've lost the plot because we have male supremacy, and in an extension of that is white supremacy or other religious supremacies or heritage supremacies that also exist. The white supremacy is, by far the most absurd and well established one in our culture globally. It's really pervasive and hard to stop at this point, but we need to. But when you have these hierarchical systems, the idea is intellectual superiority and moral superiority. So the problem with the proletariat is that it does imply that they're like morally inferior, or sorry, morally superior, and the bourgeoisie is morally inferior, and that's part of it. And even if you say that, like, well, are you trying to make us feel sympathetic towards them by talking about it as a neurological thing? Or are you trying to say that people with neurological things are bad morally? You know what I mean? I'm like, nope, not saying any of that stuff. I'm just saying it's a garbage in, garbage out. Like, what is the mechanism? What's the hardware that the wetware is running? You know, and the wetware gets changed by the hardware. And so we have like interdependent brains and personalities. We aren't really separate, and so being exposed to a doing as arriving behavior period is going to make it more likely to have a proletariat bourgeoisie apparent like split in society, is what I'm arguing. So I think my explanation is deeper or further upstream than what was saying. And Marx would say that because he would have been around the same time that, like, the early psychoanalytics, which, believed stuff about how women have penis envy and Oedipus complexes and blah blah blah. Like, so that's where I would just note that if we want class to be analyzed, we have to understand that it doesn't make a new category of person to have these different classes, but what it does is change what we're exposed to. So our environments change, and we are also exposed to the people who are in the higher class and their pathologies because they have a desire to be seen for beating everyone in some hierarchy that doesn't exist. So we're stuck with, I think, a form of psychosis being reintroduced to us every single day, which is going to distort our reality testing. And like in Marx's era, I don't know what it would have been like for him, because you got to think the technology is so drastically different at this point that the metaphors that he had to construct an understanding of his everyday life was probably difficult to even imagine living with. What we have to say is that the brain is always going to rely on context clues from our memory and from the environment around us and from other people who we can check. Like, hey, this is what I remember. This is what I think is happening. Does that seem reasonable to you? And that's why we have to be really, really picky about who we're going to reality test with. And I don't know how you could reality test what's happening with us with what Marx's brain was containing. It's not a great partner for that. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't read and learn from it, but just don't see him as a sage or some sort of like a predictive machine. He wasn't. Like, there's so much he clearly didn't know, and it showed in how he acted and how his life was. And yeah, like
It's worth noting,
yeah,
by the way,
it wouldn't have been possible for
that
someone to come with this back then, Marx or anyone. But go ahead.
it's just like I think also you got to keep in mind that with any thinker, their philosophy and like stances on things change over time. Like I think even Marx has changed, especially with the proletariat and then people from like the country where he had a more negative view, but then he sort of like became more positive about them. He did more like theses and like different papers on it, which don't get as often quoted or as read, and so people kind of just like forget or limit things to a certain direction. Now, my thoughts, I mean, with Marx, uh, and I think just first off, I should just say that like I've never instinctively or just even experientially believed in any sort of like moral or material superiority uh, of any sort of gender or group, sorry, any sex or group over another, right? It's never kind of occurred to me, and it just doesn't feel natural. And then I think like the science also backs this up. The second thing is that I think the way that I understand with Marx and like a lot of the stuff that came from it, right? I'm sure you'd agree from like a materialist perspective, like the class divide is useful, at least in that the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. I mean, it's as simple as the class divide is that the bourgeoisie class has just the differing economic interests, or they believe in maintaining a capital hierarchy, and they should have uh, potentially like disproportionate access to all of like the means of right the means of production, but then the means of capital and all the resources because they supposedly took all the risks, right? They supposedly do all this work, even though like obviously that a lot of that stuff is a lie. And I think I don't know whether Marx himself believed that because it's been a while since I read some of the stuff, that the proletariat was morally superior, but he certainly believed that, like, obviously the workers they should be emancipated because obviously the vast majority of humanity were in that class. Most people, like it's in the name, they didn't know anything but their children, right? That's kind of where the meaning of the word comes from. So, like, it all just comes down to, at least to me, it's like, if you're struggling with hard material conditions and it's hard to push out of that space, then yeah, it is a class struggle. It is about equalizing economic stress and the power and like the distribution of resources that's out there. And to me, that's extremely simple. It comes down to like the material things. Like a person, a small class of people is hoarding, I don't know, all of the bananas or all of the blueberries or whatever, and they'll do things like rituals of like giving gifts and kind of getting like in the good graces and making up a big myth and a story about why, like and religions, right, kind of also factor into this, because what did Marx say, like the religions were like the opium of the masses and whatnot. So we're living through the fallout. The language might have changed from his times, but we're still existing in the same sort of experiences as there've always been. Now, it should be noted that in the modern age and what we have now is a lot better than the complete dominance hierarchies that existed for, I think, the majority of human history, where it was like, kings and emperors, and like, it was very much you would be killed if you like, which I mean, you still are killed for like protesting and stuff like that today, but then at least the notions of democracy uh, actually started being actioned upon, right? And then you had like the revolutions, and you had, I think, like in Spain, they really had it working with the anarchist communes. Uh, but like I said, it was the communist socialists from Russia who nipped that in the bud, because they were the Soviet Union was a dictatorship masquerading, obviously as a socialist republic. They used
Mhm.
it as part of the clout to get into power, from
Mhm.
the Tsarist regime. And like they needed the anarchist communes to fail, and they needed to sabotage them, because that was a existential threat to all regimes around the world, right? Because they were the quote unquote socialist bloc, but in fact they were just like team B, team blue, in the red blue
Yeah.
sports or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
because it's still a finite game, so you're still trying to
Mhm.
eliminate others. So okay. So here's my okay. Here's why I think
Your
Marxism.
response? Yeah.
Yeah, Marxism fails, and even that, while interesting, still fails. So if you say like they'll kill you, who will kill you specifically? Like
Well,
which?
the enforcers, the people that get paid, that the ones who get convinced basically that like if I align with the prison guards, if I'm on their good graces, I'm not going to be hurt, right?
Hmm.
You don't get othered.
So okay, so the not the people that report you, so not those people, right? Those they're being strategic. That could be all kinds of people. That could be children. Who are the people that
Yeah.
actually kill you? Like, tell me about them. What are they like? What kind of person?
The enforcers?
Yeah.
Oh, the executioners? I mean,
Hmm.
they're the people who I think they're the ones probably who like the most like zealous. Well, some of them, right? They either, if they're not like, some of them are like completely psychopathic, right? But
Hmm.
then there's ones who like believe in like the lies and propaganda of the state, that like this group is extremely bad and we need to like root out this like impurity, right? That's staining this perfect order. That if people just complied and like fulfilled their roles without complaining, then things would be okay. So these guys become like champions of like justice and defending like the community
Hmm.
and whatnot. Like,
Hmm.
so they're, I guess, the martial, like the warrior class, right? Like in the hierarchical kind of system, who get used instead of like they're they want to protect the vulnerable, but that sort of like impulse gets warped, and they instead like make sure to oppress anybody who might question the order, right?
Right. And you said you did a very important word. When you're describing it, you said you guys. Why did you say you guys?
True. See, I normally actually do think to say you folks, but then good
No, no,
point.
no,
It's
no, no, no. Because
yeah,
there's a good reason you did
because yeah,
that.
yeah.
Because they're
I'm
who?
sure, because it's probably like ingrained. Yeah, they're men probably, yeah.
And
Or at least the men have the
how
monopoly.
old are they? How old are they? This is going to be a split question, but how old are the men that
Hmm.
do this? Think about it.
I'd
Like,
say between like 18 and like 35,
hmm.
probably.
Would you say that the 35-year-olds might be talking to the 18-year-olds?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yep. Yep. So you have the older men
Hmm.
grooming younger men who they know have impulse
Yeah.
control issues, and who they also seem to be, like, a lot of these older men tend to be kind of pedophilic, if not, they're trying to get these boys killed, and they're trying to move in on these girls. And this is like a thing. So where is that in Marx's analysis? Even though we can clearly see this as part of it. This is the problem.
Hmm.
So you cannot investigate what even a wage means until you start to have representative government that actually has, like, you need to acknowledge the male female thing in the species, and then you can have people that play with the historical and personal implications of it. But
Hmm.
if you cannot talk about this, it's an elephant in every single room. And who does that protect? Abusive people who like this system. And that's where we're stuck. It's too embarrassing for men to talk about. It's too embarrassing for people who are male but don't identify as men to talk about, because this sucks that our species is that warped and trapped in something that we find weird and uncomfortable to talk about. But that only benefits
Which
a
part specifically? I'd be happy to talk about this.
I think we have a hard time with the fact that we have sex and babies come out of it, like, period.
Uh-huh.
We have a hard time with, like, well, what does that mean if I talk to somebody that I could have a baby with? I mean, I'm not having a baby with. And we have religions based on this. We have religions about virgin births. We have a really weird, messed up society where people, like, the most respected religions still believe that there's basically a man god who impregnated a woman, or there's a man god that told all the other men what to do, and women are supposed to do
Yeah.
whatever the men say. You cannot
Yeah.
leave that in place and understand money
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the
Have you
same
heard about
time.
prima nocta? You used to have the tradition of like the king would have like the rights to like any married couple, or like in some places it
I
used to
have
be like a
not heard
thing.
that, and I'm not surprised. Where was that?
I know that was like in various medieval kingdoms. I know England had it. This was like in the
Gross.
early Middle Ages
Yeah,
period.
I've seen
Yeah,
that in, like, movies and stuff. That makes sense. Yeah, yeah. So now,
yeah.
okay. So then, what am I wanting us to do with the conversation from there, right? So yeah, and what I'll say, Marxism just misses so
I
much of
actually
what
do want
affects
to just
modern
ask a
society.
question in relation to
Please,
that.
please.
I had like a brief video that actually came up recommended, and I hadn't finished watching it. But the video was actually it was you know, a female socialist was talking about how socialism and like communism, right, in a lot of these states that started with this sort of like with Marxist thought, how they supposedly led to a lot of increased rights for women specifically, and
Mhm.
she went into different examples.
Mhm. Yep.
So, like, on the one hand, I'm interested to learn more from what you're sort of like seeing and suggesting.
Yeah.
But then it does seem to me, and I know from my own personal experiences, my parents grew up in the Soviet Union, and so did my grandparents. They did, it seems like, from what I know, like culturally, so socioculturally, there was less of like a domination of women, even
Mhm.
from my own family life, from my experience, like with my mom, right?
Mhm.
And yet, obviously, I'm not suggesting that it was equal by any measure, definitely. But
No.
yeah,
Yeah, no, but
I felt like
it shook
mentioning
things
that.
up. There's some interesting feminist Marxist analysis. There's also some interesting feminist socialist analysis, and I just think it's worthwhile to look that up intentionally, and also look into analyses that are, if you can
If
find
you've got
ones.
any resources, please send me the
Yes,
names.
yes, I'd be happy to. There's a couple readers that have, like, the best if you can find. They're usually out of print. There's a couple that I've read that I really like. That it's like a reader where it's a bunch of essays, and there'll be people at different intersections. So you'll get people that are like indigenous women, black women from America, women from Africa. Like, you want to do that. That's what I would say, is like,
Oh no,
get.
I do, and
Yeah,
I ask
yeah,
around. It's just most people like, unlike if it won't be a person like yourself who've done this reading because they know these various
yeah,
perspectives.
yeah.
I often I have to resort, I don't know, to like
Let
different
me see
places
if I have
online
one.
to try to find like resources.
Yeah,
So
you're
yeah,
and you're gonna, like, I have to hit up a couple libraries. Let me see if I have one handy. There's one that I have that's really good, but I don't know where I put it. Oh, where did it go? Okay, it might be buried at the moment, but I will send some resources over. But okay, so okay, my point with all that is that what we need to do at this point, I think, is to question wealth and money. Period. The end. Instead of saying, like, well, these people need to have more of it in this way, or these people need to have less of it in this way, we may need to scrap the whole thing.
oh, I agree with you 100% because like like in hunter-gatherer society, right? It was all fine and
Yeah.
dandy while money didn't exist.
Yes.
Like
We've
in the
had
immediate term, it's impossible without a redistribution.
we Yes, exactly.
It
So what
feels like,
what we
yeah.
need to do is have a conversation about what counts as being rewarded financially and what doesn't. So it's like Mexico is having a really interesting conversation about having pension for every woman over 60 years old because they have done labor for not only their own children, most likely, but other children as well, because women are put into that role in society and they've had unpaid labor that has directly benefited the national GDP and every measure of like economic stability. If you don't have that, now that shouldn't be the way that we go down the road from here. I think that we need to have totally different school system. Like all of this needs to be taken apart with as much skepticism as possible, but that includes all the way to the money part. And that's what you don't get out of critiques that were written in previous centuries, because they couldn't question the money part, or else they'd have to question what they had done to their own wives. Okay, so if you
Right.
okay, so for example, let's say we think that money rewards the value that you produce. Not true. Women and mothers. Not true. False.
Right.
Where like it might like how much money do people's children produce in the world? And they produce the child. And you could put this in a calculator and see exactly how much of what they did contributed to this person being able to do this. Like if they're the people that taught them their first word, second word, 10,000th word, then they've done it.
Yeah.
That's them. Okay, so there's that. So it can't be that. So then, okay, is money like a caloric expenditure, or is this a metabolic thing? False. Now you got to pay women again. Do you know how expensive it is to just have a period metabolically? So now tearing it
Yeah.
down through revolution is not great as an idea, because you don't want to encourage violence from a system that has driven people mad with this exposure to violence, because they will violent on you. So we want to not have a violent response to this. What we have to do, and this is going to sound really crazy, but I'm going to say it anyway, we have to actually get the people that are doing the harmful things that are currently untouchable because of quote unquote billions of dollars mattering, and they need to be in a involuntary psych hold and then evaluated by the top psychologist in the fucking world, and then we have a discussion. And it's not like we're putting them in rich people prison. We actually have to analyze human behavior, and they have to be test subjects to understand the behavior. Does that sound ambitious? Okie dokie. Like, do we want to die? Like that's how I would put it. I'm like, okay, so we can march towards the like heat death of our species, or we can be like, okay, you guys say you're so great, okay, we're going to do a psych hold on you, and we're going to see what makes you tick, and we're not going to be delicate about it. We're going to be real about it. Do you want the species to matter? Okay, we're going to have to do it. And the thing is, we kind of could now, because we have the ability to translate our voices in almost real time. We can have these conversations in ways that are not very disruptive to the other activities that we need to do to keep the current economic system sort of chugging along. And it'll probably chug along better because we'll have hope for the future. So I like, it's not like I want to be overly I guess utopian about it. How to make it happen. So the way that I think we make it happen is we talk about this over and over and over and over and over and over again. Repetition is how humans decide something is worth testing as a reality testing exercise. The only way that you figure out this is something I should check is if you hear it enough times for your brain to connect it to other experiences and test it yourself. If you haven't reality tested the idea inside of your own mind, you're not going to know how to do it with other people. So me just saying this to you and you being like, that kind of makes sense. That's it. We just did it. And then you do it again and again and again and again. You journal about it and you talk to as many people as you possibly can about it until this becomes a habit. And then you share that habit online. You delete comments from ding dongs. You try to make sure it doesn't get too distorted so you can't do the work. That's the unfortunate thing. People will misunderstand this. They'll attack you because they're still in the doing is arriving hierarchy, which I still have to write a paper to try to break them out of. So we basically have to reteach people how to listen for reality testing cues, practice reality testing by themselves, and then listen for cues over and over and over and over and over again until your brain is kind of doing it automatically. Because that's what you're not able to do when you have to do is arrive, because it's a physicalized, embodied state, not just a metaphor. It's something that you are using your like three-dimensional mammal body and metabolism to understand every single day, even when it gets abstract, the way that we're talking about it now. But basically, doing is arriving means you're going to plug into the part of your brain that lets you walk even though you're injured to get away from danger and threats. That's what you're turning on. Okay? No, because if that's turned on, you cannot notice small details. You cannot stop. You cannot heal. Your body is not able to go into that like rest and digest state that is necessary for you to do this level of reality testing. So you need to work on self-control and then realize that you're not ruminating when you repeat something over and over and over again. They don't say that Trump was ruminating about a stupid wall or everything being gold. He's going over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. But his ideas are just doing as arriving goals. Like he just has this idea of like, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go here. And he doesn't care where he is. If you do that with a doing as arriving goal, the repetition behavior, which is your only choice, by the way, to make something happen for a human being, you have to repeat it. We need repeatable conditions for something to become stable. And the problem with doing is arriving is it's fundamentally unstable because you don't perceive the conditions. So there's no re-perceivable conditions because you don't perceive. You just are repeating the conditions without perceiving the effects. So when we're practicing this right now, we're saying, I'm noticing something again. I'm perceiving it and thinking about it again. And I'll think about it again. I don't know how to fix it yet, but I'll think about it again. I don't know how to fix it yet, but I'll think about it again. Instead of, I don't know how to fix anything because I'm just high on arrival juices. And that's when you're insane, like basically like
I
that's
guess
what I would
the
describe as
tricky
insane.
bit with that is a lot of people maybe might find it hard if they do get to that stage, like the stage before where they might be trying to do that, but it gets mixed up. Like,
Yeah.
though doing that will generate lots of anxiety,
Yes.
like thinking a lot about it, and it puts people in that right painful position,
Yes,
and
but
that's what puts a lot of people off.
that's when you need to differentiate. So it's okay to be in some pain. Not all pain is hurt. Not all hurt is painful. Okay, so if you are in doing is arriving, it won't be very painful, but you'll be hurting the shit out of yourself and other people because you're literally in the metabolic mode that allows you to stay motivated to get away from where you currently are because it's dangerous to go to where you want to be where it isn't dangerous. Except you never arrive there because there is no such place. And actually, when you get to the next place, the world is more dangerous because you are not perceiving the world and making it, more stable and yourself more stable. So you will be in pain, right? But you can be healed. So instead of continuing to hurt yourself, but not be in pain. So we need to understand there's like there's something to that until you get to know it, you'll be too afraid to do it. And people are trying to make you even artificially afraid of it by threatening you or bullying you or etc. So we've been exposed to the behavior of the doing is arriving people at such a high volume that we will mimic them.
Well, yeah, I mean, for survival, right? It's actually the structures were inculcated since millennia. So it's very hard to pull out of that in a sense. For like the vast majority of people, you think folks like yourself and I, like we're uh privileged comparatively to like a lot of the folks who, like, let's say what about, I think I read 3 billion people now face like
Mm-hmm.
water insecurity.
Yeah.
It's gonna get higher in the future.
Yeah.
Most people are barely making enough ends meet to like feed themselves
Yes.
across the planet, and
Yes.
so I definitely agree with what you're saying, but then also, again, I'm not saying that, oh, but then that doesn't mean anything because most people's lives are filled with so much pain where they are, and like they're coasting by and they'll have like dreams or hopes of making it rich, of somehow like winning the doing is arriving sort of like course, and they see that as the only option because that's what they're shown and told all the time, right?
Well, and well, they have to stop the pain too. Like that's you can't
Exactly.
you can't go all the way through like a major life emergency without it teaching you that this can't keep happening. What am I going to do? Do I consider myself a radical
Oh
feminist?
yeah,
I
because you
consider
would die
myself
from
a
shock.
new genre of feminist. I think so. Radical feminism is, it depends. I mean, there's lots of things that refers to be honest. Like there's different schools of thought. I don't think it's specific enough. even if somebody says they're a radical feminist, I think they still need to be more specific. I consider myself a post-structuralist, neuro. What am I thinking about this? Like a post-structuralist neurofeminist, probably. Like I mean, it's radical to think
Well,
about feminism from the perspective of
maybe
the
the person is
brain.
asking if you would be considered as a radical feminist from the average peer.
Um, I don't think they even know what that means. I could be, I guess. I don't know. People would think I'm an intersectional feminist. They might think that I'm yeah. I'm definitely if you're post-structuralist, then like you're kind of good just labeling it that, and then put like any shading around it of like who you follow that's outside of the field, that like, like I know someone who's a post-structuralist materialist feminist, because she would say that like she's really locking it down to material analysis of the world. And like that seems closer to where I'm at. um but I think I'm a post-structuralist neurofeminist. That's what I think I am, because I'm so rooted in like how the brain is outside of the models of patriarchy imposed on it. And that, I think that's what messes up understanding of feminism, is like there's still the imposition of like the triune brain, which I have a big issue with. Yeah, materialist transfeminist. That's fascinating. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that totally makes sense. And that, yeah. See, so I think we're at the stage of feminism where like radical feminism is kind of an era. And anybody who says they're a radical feminist now, they either were from that era and they're continuing their project, or I think they would, if it's a newer generation of people and that they weren't in the radical feminist movement in like the 70s and 80s, they probably should signify what lineage they think they're developing, because now we need to develop new theories. We need new theorists at this point. So I think it's better to like start to carve out our own words for it, and then put like a nod to like, oh, like my intersectionalism is informed by Crenshaw, or who else would I say? Um, couple people. Who's more than the other? Well, after Crenshaw, Bell Hooks probably. Yeah. Um. Yeah. It's and so okay. So feminism. I wouldn't say it's so. Jamie, is that similar to a liberal saying they're left, but they're still living inside the structure of capitalist hierarchical divisions, which is perpetuating these problems? Yeah. And I would say so. The tricky thing about feminism is you really do need to have an analysis, and it needs to be an a lens, a framework that you use to then understand behaviors in the past, in the present, and what you can predict will happen in the future. So if your feminism isn't like a robust theoretical like predictive engine, then it's not really doing what feminism is supposed to do. Then you're just kind of a vague like, I think that people shouldn't be hurt. I'm like, yay, that's a good thing to think. Thank you. But it's not a it's not a lens. So if you're doing feminism, you have to be applying a lens, and that lens has to be constructed. You can't just like have a feeling that this feels right, this feels wrong, and I'm just doing what feels right or wrong. You no, you're supposed to be applying a specific model of like how to interpret and analyze human society in different nuances. So like personal interactions, uh, government interactions, private like public life is kind of a big split in feminism that they take pains to analyze and insert. So if you're a feminist and you don't talk about the private public sphere, you've in that split, you've failed to like do a strong enough analysis, and you might need to rethink what you are, because that's not feminism. Like feminism means that you acknowledge that female people and anyone feminized, right? Anyone put into a position where they're supposedly in that role because of their feminine character or their feminine traits, those individuals are now limited in what they can and cannot do to change the world. So feminism use that as its anchor, because they're saying those people not only can change the world, but the only way the world changes is if those people have autonomy and become authors in the way that the male people in a male supremacist society have made themselves out to be, with threats and religion, etc. So if you until you can accept that analysis, it just doesn't make sense. Like, because then why are we in this position? If you can't say that, like, the whole thing is exploitation of some aspects of dimorphism, but it's really just like the ability to threaten rather, and to be threatened. That's really it. There's a couple other wiggly things that made this possible, but if you don't say that, then it takes on the mythology from the culture itself, and you're back to, like, well, maybe it's a god thing, or maybe it's Jesus, or maybe blah blah blah, maybe the universe is really a masculine and feminine energy. I'm like, like, we're gone, we're lost. That's what the patriarchal imagination thinks it is. So,
I think it's like it's pretty
yeah.
obvious because anybody can be dominated, anybody can be intimidated, and anybody physically can. But then the traits that they assign onto those are the feminine ones, right? So
Well, yeah.
quote unquote.
In where my feminist analysis has landed, feminine, I think, is what happens when you have to manage the delusions of a person who believes they're superior, and if you don't go along with what they want you to do, then they patrodenialate, or other forms of denilation can happen too. So they're basically saying, like, I'm going to have this psychotic state, and if you don't manage my psychosis, where I believe I'm superior to everything and my delusions are true, I'm going to hurt you, or make sure other people hurt you, or remind you that these sorts of people will hurt you, so you might hurt yourself in your own mind. I think that creates this syndrome that then is called feminine, and that's why it can be part of people who are not female. So do
You
I
know,
have
I'm
a
sure you've
problem with
heard of the term
femininity? Yeah.
passive locality,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, I have. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
So that's kind of like where that all kind of starts from, in a sense,
Yes.
because like once the agricultural studies brought that in, it's like, you're just the one woman who comes in, and you don't have any connections or any like
Yep.
female peers that you know or family members, so nobody can defend you, and
Yes.
all the men can then defend themselves and gang up on you, right?
Well, and that's why. So, matrolocate. Moving in with the female's person's family would have been better, and is better in my arguments, just in general, that's just a safer situation, because it makes it
Yeah. Well, the anthropologists discovered
safer.
that like they tend to dominate less on average and intimidate.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean, there's just a ton of reasons. But we the the way we should understand it at this point is that there's an advantage for abusive people, and there's no particular reason for anyone to become abusive. But if you have a dynamic that's like a giant cult that says these people can get their needs met by abuse, human beings can get trapped in that. And that's what's happened. That's the same thing, like whiteness is a cult as well, and that will mix with other cults, and they tend to go together, because it's like, once somebody is thinking along those ways to get their needs regulated, they will continue to use that, and join a new cult and add on more. Like, it's more that's what I'm looking for. Like, it makes it easier for them to control reality if they have multiple ways to do it. So
Mm.
your
But then
problem is,
it's like
go ahead.
it's so like endemic, because do you remember they did that experiment where like they got like a bunch of people who've never met each other from different disparate groups and identities and ethnicities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they like started dividing them based on like different headband colors, and like even then, like almost immediately from them being banded, like people started becoming prejudiced against people of a different band group, and then their group was great, and they've only just met the people like, like 10 minutes ago or whatever, but
Right.
apparently it's so endemic.
Well, it's
Yeah.
tricky. So all of this is the problem with the culture where we're at. So that's the same problem of, like, we used to think that the curves in the spine, the natural curves, were quite pronounced, and they're not. Our spines are supposed to be a lot flatter, but they studied cadavers that have been sitting in chairs since they were children. So So by the time you're studying us, you're also studying people that have been inside of the overexposure to doing as arriving. So
Right.
I don't know. I think that's true, but do I think that's human nature? No. And that's the argument for feminism, is that we don't think this is human nature. We think this is a system of abuse that then creates a counterpart response.
I feel like mentioning something on that, like from what I was reading from my anthropological studies, right? It's
Hmm.
like they would talk about so in egalitarian hunter-gatherer bands, right?
Yeah.
Like the Mbengali tribe, right?
Hmm.
Or the Mbandi, like two of them that I can think of.
Hmm.
The men and women, so they would be very egalitarian and equal, but the men and women would still form their like individual sort of like union groups, right, to represent their interests. And sometimes they'd have like rituals where they would have like sort of like a tug of war, but then like they would make it in so that like the moment that like one side was pulling like too much, one person would go to the other side, so like nobody would ever kind of win in a situation, right? And then obviously there would be lots of consequences if one person tried to dominate or take over kind of like, if you were like a skilled hunter, right, whether you're a man or a woman, you'd get a lot of a pushback if you really loved it and you tried to do it to the expense of everybody else. You get kicked out of the group, right?
Hmm.
And that's how they maintain like these very strict rules of egalitarianism in
Hmm.
like those groups, for
Yeah,
example.
and getting kicked out too is a normal thing to do in a smaller group of people. And right now we have to think about, like, we can make smaller groups, but there's very low barriers to entry, which is why the internet is kind of a problem. Is like little children can jump on pretty much anything, and they're all watching us, and we don't even think about that. So we're in a situation right
Oh,
now.
I just realized.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what they're doing to us is like they're trying to do like divide and conquer, basically, like because they don't want to lose their unity, right? To have their armies and like kind of like
Hmm.
you divide and conquer the various sort of like split unities on the internet, right? With the current like age verification laws that they're passing, but then
Well,
also just in general, you try not to get organizing happening, so you can
yeah.
break people apart,
Well, and we're not
right?
we're not we're not critiquing the dangerous individuals, because that includes the people with money. So that's the problem. That's why I'm saying there is kind of a split here. But I'm saying the
Yeah.
split comes from a specific motivational um, mechanism that splits
Mm.
way back in the evolutionary history.
Oh, good point. But then that also kind of brings your discussion on like money and stuff like that. Because like I think like I was talking to somebody today, and a friend of mine, and he's, you know,
1 second, guys. I have to switch this. Ah, oh my god, why isn't this working? Oh shit. Hold on 1 second. I need to check something on my. Pause your thought for a sec, because I'm just changing a headset thing. It's not really working. I don't know why. Why is that not working? Give me a minute. Okay, so that's working, but this isn't. Oh god damn it. Hold up. Oh god damn it. Why is this not working? Hold on. OBS is like freaking out on me. This is really annoying. 1 second. Why is it like this? Do I just not have a microphone? Hold on. Test, test, test. Why is. Okay, sorry everybody on the stream. I'm just having problems. Um. Yeah. Yeah, because the menu, I'm trying to change my mic and the menu, the little dots is like vanishing right away, and I don't know why it's doing that. I think this might be. Oh, wait, is my keyboard being touched? Oh, God.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. Okay, my keyboard. Something was lining on my keyboard, and it was like closing the window right away. So then I couldn't do my mic switch over. My headset was dying. Okay, I'm gonna have you repeat what you're saying, but let me finish on this side. That's okay.
Conquer. Oh, and like yeah, this why people find it difficult to sort of speak up or sort of see the people with like lots of money as like the issue. And I think, as you said, I wonder what that deeper root thing at
Mm-hmm.
humanity is, and like the religion plays into it, like where people maybe feel like I'm going to be super punished if I go up against the person with lots of money because apparently the money to them means power and wealth because they equate that in like their own belief system, right?
Yeah.
Or they think that maybe like if I sort of like if I fight against them I'll just become like them or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like a Bane, Batman sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or I wonder why. I guess people maybe are afraid like for that order, for the old way of going doing things to collapse, and like they're afraid of like the change that might come perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and I think also is just anyone in the chat. Can you let me know if my mic's okay? Okay. Yeah, I think. All right. Okay, if you ask these questions as far back as you need to, you're going to have to question things that people will absolutely ridicule you for questioning. So that's sort of the problem. Is that the way that we've set up our world, we're going to have to change dramatically. That doesn't mean that we're starting from scratch. It's okay to start from the buildings that we're in, for example, but the way that we spend time with the internet is going to have to change a lot. The way that we spend time.
Yeah.
Oh, sounds clear. Okay, good.
In
So that's confusing for people because what some people are afraid of is that the mythologies that we live in are telling the truth about humans, that we are these really horrible people, and this is the only thing keeping us in line. When what's actually happening is we're being exposed to people constantly that are making us have to adapt by developing pathologies ourselves. So we're not in healthy environments, and that's why we're having these problems. And the conflicts that we're having are coming from that as well. Now, if you call it out, people will say, "Well, who do you think you are?" I'm like, "I don't know. I want to be free. How about that?" Like I don't
You're
want to
rocking the
watch.
boat.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
say
yeah.
that you're rocking the boat.
Yeah, and like it sounds like a hierarchical claim, right? So this is the problem. But I'm not I'm never going to be at the top of any of the hierarchies in this world, for one. For two, I don't think hierarchies should exist. Maybe in a game, but not in a life. Like life needs to be based on development of skills, and those skills have to be developed for the reason of just them being interesting, and humans do
Right.
behave that way. But if you believe we don't, you've already bought into what's happened after you've been exposed to an abusive person over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm saying we don't have to be exposed to abusive people, that they're actually making the world comfortable for them, which will destabilize civilization and possibly, if not like all human life on Earth, then even beyond
Yeah.
that.
Well, you see with the rocking boat analogy, right? Like I can actually maybe find that link. It was on Reddit on like a Raised by Narcissists like post that I found like
Yeah.
many years ago. And like the comparative thing is like I think people are afraid that like the moment that you call it out, it's not that the boat is going to crash and collapse and everybody's going to drown. It's that the person who is causing the noise and bullying everybody on the boat, they're the ones who are going to go start like going crazy, well, do the crazy making stuff, like rock the
Yes.
boat like a lot. And people always seem to be more afraid. Well, the logical thing would just be to chuck the person out of the boat and just that one person drowns, but
Yep.
then that's not what happens.
Well, and this is unfortunately what Bandy Lee points out. Trump could feasibly get so upset he tries to nuke everyone on Earth. She's not joking about that.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. That's why this is why it's destabilizing. So It's kind of, and it will always end up there. That's the problem. So we can't live this way because we will always end up with, like, it will produce the person that will nuke the planet and kill all of us because they're mad.
Yeah.
So
I
it's like,
mean, I guess that depends because mutual resource destruction, right?
yeah, but that's assuming somebody still has any doing is building left in their brain. Like, I'm saying that okay, doing is arriving is destabilizing. It's destabilizing externally and internally. So the interiority of your brain becomes less and less able to stop you, right? So there's a go motivation and a stop motivation. If somebody solves all of their problems with the go motivation and they have access to a nuclear launch, they will be the ones to use it. The builders won't use it. That's why Oppenheimer was so freaked out. That's why my grandfather was so freaked out after the bomb was built.
Oh, that's also another. Sorry, by the way, if because if you hear my voice, maybe it's like cutting out, like, or maybe you're cutting out. So like, I'm doing my best to try not to interject. Oh, am I?
No, you're
I
good.
might
I can
have.
hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, right, okay, right. I'm just kind of thinking like, what I'm seeing right now is like a similar thing that was happening like at the start of, well, during the Cold War as well, right? Because um, like even I'm finding this in my own life, and I'm sure you obviously have the same experience. All of us do. Like, you want to build more. There's more things that you would like to
Hmm.
do, which would be the thing. Obviously, the bomb told this, but similar to the people during the Cold War, you've got the potential threat because the lie has been dispelled more. People are seeing this stuff, right? There's starting to be more dissent, more questioning of these things. So there's obviously more crazy stuff being done by the people who are rocking the boat.
Hmm.
But like, I'm finding it very difficult sometimes to push through on some days, like
Yep.
recently, because it just feels like, what's going to be my future? Like, what is going to
Yep.
be our future? Like, it potentially could end tomorrow. Like, you know what
Yep.
I mean?
Yeah, and it could. So I think the sobering thing to say, and it sucks because it's not fun to say, there are people that genuinely don't care about all of the wonderful things that are happening in the world at this moment and don't care about all of the horrible, unnecessary things that don't need to happen. And all of those conditions could be improved and not in some sort of utopian way, but in a way that is going to change how we interact with each other. If we interact with each other in that way, we would not put these people in power ever again. Okay? So the people that have power have gotten it through conditioning and grooming people to accept abuse and to accept it as part of how God made you. And that's why feminism matters because it says, well, women should accept this abuse because God wants them to.
Yeah.
So until you deconstruct that, you haven't deconstructed that notion, and you have to just deconstruct that notion. Because who's God then? Oh, God is whoever's rich at the moment, which we can see is what it's acting like.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a it's a tough one. Like, it makes me actually, I was thinking just of my own family, right? Like, I came out of like a religious sort of family, and I left, right, an abusive environment. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I guess sometimes I almost forget or I question it, but like even now I kind of, it makes me wonder, am I doing like the healthiest like thing? Is like, because I definitely, I feel, have done, and I still am doing the work of deconstructing a lot of this, right? And it
Yeah.
will continue. But like, am I supposed to like, I'm slowly breaching contact again, say like with my folks, my parents, who are like, obviously, but they're still in the same, they haven't deconstructed that stuff, and like they benefit from it as well. Now they're like, they're small landowners. Well, they're landlords in a sense. So now we have incompatible economic interests in a way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but then it's very hard. It's like, what am I, and at the same time, am I supposed to sort of like reach out more, do more, tell them more about this stuff? Because part of me is like, I'm supposed to sort of like help them, or at least introduce them to things to question, so they have an alternative to not
Yes.
just be in the cult and to
Yes.
leave.
Yes. So
Right.
that is your okay. This is something I'm going to argue. That is your responsibility as an adult. Once somebody's older, their responsibility declines because their cognitive abilities are changing, and now they're more vulnerable, which is why Fox News is actually a crime against humanity. Like, dead ass, it is. It's so abusive to the elderly. So when you're in your 30s to, let's say, 70 is where I'm going to cap it. Some people really are doing pretty good up until that point, and then even from there they do really great, but don't put too much onto them because like they can have a failure that will make it really difficult for them to have a high standard of life from there forward. So if you're in your 30s all the way through to your like 60-year-old as a buffer, and nothing neurologically impactful has changed your understanding of like reality such that you need to now get support yourself, and I'm a vulnerable person for my autism, and I'll even note that you have a responsibility to everyone younger and older than you to make sure that they are not exploited by sociopaths and psychopaths. Period. The end. We have failed to do this because it's systemic, and that's what I don't hear Marx have any capacity to talk about, right? Like, it's not there. You can get feminist analysis that will add on and give that a little more breathing room and say how they find it useful to interlace the concepts, but you don't need Marx to talk about this. You just need modern neuroscience. That's it. And you need some awareness that when people are acclimated to abuse, we don't have terms for that. So the idea of like codependency, I take real issue with. Stockholm syndrome, I even take issue with. There's something going on with the individual who needs to adapt to prevent being harmed by abusive people with power. And those people are very young and very old as well, and those adaptations will change over their life. So we are responsible for trying to talk to our elders and talk to our you know, juniors about this. But we haven't been told that we're even adults. Like, that's what I think is so insidious about what happened to millennials. We were treated like we were children well past the time when that was appropriate,
Mm.
without any model of what I'm talking about where there's actually a responsibility. And I would argue there is no such model of responsibility because the whole Epstein shit was happening. That's not what you should be doing to children. That's not how you should respond to adults doing that to children. None of them met their responsibility. Every single person who knew about that did not meet their responsibility, and apparently most of them had some connection to our government. So how could they possibly meet that responsibility? They can't. And I think that's part of why the millennials were treated like shit. I think it's really, really like deeply psychologically rooted what's happening, and we have to talk about um, being concerned for the well-being of others, not as a nurturance rule, because then that's associated with femininity, which is really this other half of abusive psychosis, is what I'm calling it. It's a syndrome of
It would
trying
include
to,
enabling
yeah,
and things
exactly.
like that.
Oh yeah, many adaptations to being exposed continuously to a stochastic form of abusive psychosis. Like, it could come from anywhere almost, and you have to like screen people. That's what I realized after a while. I'm like, I'm not screening people for like misogyny. I'm screening people for abusive psychosis. Like,
Yeah, I
when,
guess
yeah,
one
yeah. Go ahead.
mm,
Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say one of my difficulties then, like say like in my family situation, is, like I'm just between like the millennial Gen Z side because I'm 27. My parents
Yep.
are in their 50s, but I now I would personally feel like saying that for my life, I that responsibility I felt it since I was very young. It felt like the adults around me
Right.
for probably for understandable reasons couldn't take responsibility for some of these things. I had to teach a lot, like learn a lot of stuff on my own and
Yeah.
sort of figure it out for experience. But even now, right?
Mhm.
I agree with you that I have the responsibility to help them not get into these really bad places, the cognitive decline. But then I'm also kind of like barely keep myself afloat. And then it's like, let's say that, for example, as I said, right, I was in a situation where I was like in a position of being exploited by my own parents, right? So like then walking back, they have like the greater financial security and power. So I'm trying to interact with them in a way that money doesn't exist at all. But it
Yes.
almost feels like when I try to reach them, it seems so difficult because anytime
Yes.
recently I've noticed when I tried to reach out to them, they always bring it back to money. They're always like, "Oh, how can we help you?" Like, and it always feels like a trap because it's always like,
It
if you need
is.
any money, if you need this or that. And then sometimes I do need the like. It would obviously help not to worry about some of these financial things, and for people not to look at me like as a waste of space because I'm on some disability grants.
Hmm.
also being autistic.
Hmm.
My parents would completely not like if they. I'm partially afraid to even say to them about some of my economic sort of situation, because if they actually knew the whole truth, the high likelihood is they would be shocked, because they would be like, how would you bring yourself in this ability where you should have been like at a position higher in the hierarchy? You should have like you all this thing that we did for you. You're supposed to reach like this bigger thing or
Right.
whatever, right?
So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what I'll say. So I think money is okay. How do I put this carefully? Money is crazy a little bit. It doesn't really make sense. So if somebody tries to hold money over you, they could be poor tomorrow. Like the way that these systems are going, they may realize that they are financially like doomed at some point. And then what was all of that for, right? So I think what we have to do is talk to people as if we're already outside of the system of money, because the only
Yeah.
way for people to get in touch with who they would be outside of the system of abuse is to create a pocket universe of it. Even if it's like this big, even if it's super tiny, that's the only way, because it gets reinforced everywhere all the time, and it's not stable. So it can just go away. And then what was all of that? If somebody has latched their identity to it and says that they had to, I'm saying that that becomes, it's, if it's not the abusive psychosis, it's the syndrome that adapts to it. And you
The
can't work
latter
with
for my
that.
parents,
Yeah,
I would
exactly,
say.
exactly. So then you can start to have compassion for that again, and you're not looking down on
Yeah.
them or thinking you're better than them. You're
No.
realizing like, oh, in a different world, we would get to really be with each other. How much can I try to be with them before our lives are over? How much can I be with them before money takes all of it away from us? Because people will cling
Yeah,
to money as part of their identity, and it's you can, yeah, oh, that's why we're stuck.
yeah, I hope that you're right. I mean, I'm slowly moving towards doing these things, like reaching out. I was even thinking about potentially like organizing a meetup with them. But the way that we push out of the money is like maybe to do a joint little building activity in some
Yes,
way,
yes,
somehow to try to push their attention like towards that.
yes.
But I'm just so tired because like I still am doing this mostly on my own. And like again, I grew up with no siblings, so like I'm so would like there not to be any more like mentions of like, oh, you don't have this milestone yet. Oh, you don't have like this money yet. You don't have this thing yet. And I'm like, yes, I'm doing my best to try to survive as much as I can on my own, like anybody else. Like I'm past the point of like being embarrassed by any of my actions, because
Good.
again, I'm doing things for my very basic survival, literally so I don't starve to death and stuff like
Yes,
that. So
yes.
I'm like over their whole yeah, so it's just
And you're
I
doing,
just
well, I
yeah,
want to just add, you're doing things to try to understand how to work with your brain, even though society isn't acknowledging that you have different needs than what they gave you as like what's enough for people. It doesn't work for you. The things that are supposed to help you for life to be enough don't do anything, or make it worse. The things that would actually make your life better are treated as luxuries or even
yeah.
as negative. So you, you're
I mean,
having
I'm
to
struggling
assert a
even
lot.
now to meet some of my needs, because some of my
Yeah.
needs have been unmet my whole life, and even now, like where I do have some little bit of capital, like I'm still dealing with like I'm struggling sort of like to push past in some ways like the guilt, or it's not even so much the guilt, but it's more like there's like a bit of a fear of like if I engage in these like more openly, then people look at me and then they will see that I am like I'm exploiting, like, say if you're like on the disability grants, right? Because you're
Hmm.
struggling and you're struggling to find a job as well, like meaningful, gainful employment. You're not being exploited. I've already been, I don't want to repeat this thing again that I was through, right? It was
Yeah.
also traumatizing on top with some of the environments that I was in.
Yeah.
Like, how do I just like, I'm able to forgive and, well, not just forgive, but just accept myself and do some like the natural building stuff and to feel that it's not going to sink me at
Right.
some point.
Well, and that's it. So what what we have to start banking on a little bit, like if we have to bet on anything, it's that people will meet us at the post like monetary system. we're going to have to. Okay, it just sounds so radical, but it's just true.
We got to
We
put our chips on it. Yeah,
yeah, we have to. And then like, how do we do that? We talk about it again, and we talk about it again. So then this becomes the reality testing activity that we are used to getting back into, and then we can get into it with other people. And there is a part of them that can imagine this, but it's not practiced. Because what did they get reinforced all the time? Are you good at hierarchy? Are you good at hierarchy? Are you good at... And then you just have to ask, like, but why though? Oh, because if you're good at hierarchy, you get money. I'm like, but do you? Most of the time people don't. That seems to be a myth. So what are we being good at? Lying or bullshitting,
yeah.
or not even caring if you're lying or telling the truth, but just going into the right spot in the hierarchy. So you, you're able to do this, but you're not getting enough practice. You're
Mm.
able to talk about this, but you're not getting the opportunities to work on it. And if you do talk
This is
about
what you
it
said last
publicly,
time.
yeah, go for it.
No, because you said this last week in like, do you remember when you're saying like when you're trying to get a mentor and like you have the like so right, so you have like a session one time a week, but if you don't have the classes
Yes.
to put into action like those insights that you get, it can harm you more. And like
Hmm.
as much as I might learn and like get these insights and it makes sense, often I just don't have anything to act upon. Now I have been thinking that perhaps I need to start perhaps being more patient, biding my time, more as in like I need to work purely with what I have in front of me with my hands right now, like rather
Hmm.
than try to sort of do too much ahead of time while I
Yeah.
don't have anything to work with, if that makes sense.
Right. No, and work in your mind is valid, not valid. It's valuable. Okay? So you have to understand value isn't hierarchical reward. Value
Right.
is meaning and the improvement in how well you understand meaning. That is value now. Okay? Because it's doing is building value. So the valuable things you are doing are not categorized as such, but you need to first acknowledge value in terms of meaning, retention, meaning, extraction. Well, not extraction, but meaning like synthesis. You can connect to meaning. You can understand how meaning connects, and that ability improving. So as long as that's
Mhm.
improving, you're okay.
Yeah.
And that's just, you just gotta stick to your guns. Like, this is gonna open up opportunities for
Mm.
you that will also stabilize you in the world at large. They still exist, they always will. You will have to hunt some of them down. It will
Yeah.
make it harder at times, but you are not falling apart. People are falling
No,
apart because they don't stop.
yeah, you're right. But yeah, you're right. It's just, I guess it's maybe just right now it's a bit of a tough spell, which it'll
Hmm.
pass. It's That's the
Hmm.
reason why I'm here. Like the reason why I'm talking to you right now is because you are like living proof that yes, there is value in like building these things
Yes.
mentally. And
Yes.
although even now, like if I'm just by myself, in some ways, when I'm outside of this group more or less, and
Hmm.
all of this work goes unseen, like unappreciated or whatever, right?
Hmm.
It takes a lot of mental resilience. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I am, as much as I feel like I have persevered through a lot and through some insane things, even in my brief time of life, comparatively, say to you, maybe, like I'm not like my stamina, maybe, or maybe not the stamina is the word, but like my mental fortitude isn't limitless.
Yeah.
Even though like I've been through some insane things, like how do I replenish? How do I like
Yes.
regenerate a little bit of that, if
Yes, yes,
that
yes.
makes sense?
That, yeah. No, that makes complete sense. Okay, so the way that I've started thinking about that, so your brain is building an interiority or growing an interiority. Okay, so you have already made fields in your mind that can hold seeds, and the seeds will continue to grow, and they're just in there. Like, your brain is kind of fertile in that way. But the other thing that will
But it
happen,
needs water, right? It
yeah,
needs
well,
lots of tending and stuff.
it needs tending. It needs uh, points of stillness where you trust that those connections that are happening, and you're consistently caring about them, you're taking a little attention, that you're not ruminating, you're not just going in circles, you're checking in with it for the day, right? So if somebody can think
Right.
that the guy walking through the field is walking in circles, but he's looking. He's perceiving what is happening with each little seed. So you're doing that, but the weird thing about it is your mind is kind of like a black hole, and it's much, much, much bigger inside. There's more room for you to have more fields and to have seeds that are even smaller and tighter packed together. And so the ecosystem that you're making in your mind will make the next crop more stable. The next thing you plant will have more room because there's this like weird expansion sort of thing that's fractal. So your brain is going to be able to zoom in with more care. It'll be more delicate, more precise. But all you really have to do is relax, calm down, like allow that coordination of going in the circle to check out all of your crops to become its own thing, its own skill. And I don't think that's meditation. I think it gets like equated to it if I talk about it probably, but you actually have to like trust in yourself as a gardener. You have to trust and believe in yourself, and that every little thing you're doing, adding more care to it, is what will allow you to develop. Okay, so it's there, and then you're going to care for it a little bit more. So there's two things you're doing. You're planting the seed, and then you're caring for it, and then that's your work for today. And anything you have to do to
Here's the
arrive
question that I
at
have
the
for
goal.
you.
Uh-huh.
This is all true. I agree. It's what I'm going through. I guess how would you like my consistent problem throughout many years has been I feel like I often don't know. I guess I perceive almost that I have like a lack of consistency. Anytime I try to be consistent or to learn like when I should water, how I should do it, obviously to know when not to over harvest, right?
Mhm.
When to leave like the field fallow and stuff like that. I seemingly either like anything that I thought I think I know about my interiority always gets disintegrated, or I'm then like I get lots of like doubts, and then I have to redo the work of like trying to figure out what's happening on the inside, what's actually true about my interiority and then about the world.
Sure.
And that keeps getting more complex as I learn more. But
Yes.
often it's like I can go through these very random intervals of like how I tend to myself, because again, anytime I try to do it consistently, like, try to, I don't know, wake up in the morning, do the journaling, hang from like the pull-up bar, because you were mentioning about the curvature in the spine, right? And I
Yeah.
have a little bit of that, and I'm trying to sort of like address that, which is why I've got like the little pull-up bar, right?
Mhm.
Not to do
Mhm.
pull-ups, but to do the hanging,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes, yes, yes. I do that too.
And I should be doing that, like I should technically, I know, be doing that far more frequently. But then this has been a problem throughout my life. Why am I struggling to face these things uh patiently? Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's
Well, it's I think you've probably gotten to the point where pushing it is even more important than how many things you're doing. So, okay.
oh,
Basically,
Jane, just a sec. When you said how you're approaching, you cut off
mhm.
there. Can you
Oh,
repeat that?
yeah, so how you're approaching it is more important than how many things you work on in the day. So,
Right.
if you wanted to do it, don't do it casually, right? You want to
Right.
do it in a way that's like extremely focused on the thing you're doing and not overanalyzing yourself to the point that you're like tensing up, like still relax and believe in yourself, like confidently,
That would be
but
difficult.
do you see that? Make sure like so you want to be confident but not casual. Does that make sense?
That's almost like the most difficult state for me to reach,
Yeah.
because yeah, the tension is huge. It's crazy that I tend to go through, so I have to go through a lot to unwind. But then the confidence then is like I'm not used, I don't have the experience in that state, so it's maybe I
Well,
just have to
it's
keep doing it. I
stay
don't know.
connected. Stay connected. So if you're not
Uh-huh.
confident, what will happen is you'll disconnect parts of yourself that you're not sure about, and then but then they're like not part of what you're doing. So you
But then there's a
want
paradoxical contradiction also somewhat to what you're saying, because like this idea of like, well, you sort of have to practice being that like confident, but then like if you don't have a foundation for being confident, then how do you practice doing that?
right, you will and so okay, so best way to think of it is like it's something that will affect you how you work every single day. Okay? So you're serious about what you're doing. You don't have to be overly serious about yourself. That will backfire. But the decisions that you're making and that you're presenting for yourself to make, like you're like, okay, I could do this, I could do that, blah blah blah. You're doing it in a way that shows a amount of care, like you actually love what you're doing. And if you love something, you wouldn't shit on it, right? Like that. So you don't believe in yourself because you hate other people. You believe in yourself because you have cultivated a love for yourself. You don't trust yourself because you just don't trust anyone else. That's not what we're trying to do. So the tension is like coming from the feeling that if you don't get this right, it's going to be bad. Like no one's got you. And
Well, and
that
time's limited and
yeah,
stuff.
exactly. There's all this pressure. So what you can do instead is take the moment that you're currently in, allow whatever memories are going to come up that you need to process to be there too, right? Like take it all together and just realize there is enough space in your mind to hold that. Try to hold it all. Okay? And that's how
Yeah.
you build interiority in your brain to be able to hold it. It might be painful and you might even be a little bit hurt and you need to acknowledge that hurt. So there may be times, especially
Mm.
with like autism or neurodivergency, where you'll get really dysregulated and you'll look physically dysregulated and you'll have to recover. I cry personally and like have catatonia. Okay. So,
Yeah,
you know,
same. It's funny because I know this. I've done this before, and it's like you're 100, you're 10 billion% right. It's like I guess I just have to do this every day. Like I have to wake up, and maybe I do actually need to sort of like go through the breathing exercises to calm myself first, like the first thing
yeah,
during the day, and that maybe is the most important part for me
yeah,
because what you're describing to hold it all in, I've done it before. It's not the first time I've done this, but like it's almost like every single time I try this, I still feel as if like I'm with that beginner, and I still have that beginner fear, even though I've done it before, maybe multiple. I know I've done this before multiple
yeah,
times,
yeah,
and yet I still act as if like I'm gonna make a huge mistake. I'm gonna like it's not gonna work out, and
absolutely.
I still have almost this belief system in my head.
Yes, and I think I mean the breathing actually makes a lot of sense. Like a lot of people who are neurodivergent, our brain gets us into a state where our breath is already starting to spiral. And I get that even I get that in dance. I want like the biggest correction I
Oh,
probably
for me
have
it's
right
the
now is
opposite.
just dance and breathing.
For me, well, not the opposite, but for me, it's always felt like I don't breathe at all. My whole life,
Yeah,
it
no,
feels
no,
like my breath is being very still.
no,
Yeah.
no. That's what I mean. You hold your breath and then you have to struggle to breathe because you held it too long. So if you can just continue, like just focus on your breath. Like I think that probably is the best place to start, so that your whole body, your whole brain, it's all one thing, right? So it all is part of what you can care about, and no point when you're working through whatever it is you're doing, you say, well, you can't come. You all can come. You're all good enough. You can't come. You stay back. I don't like you. About your brain, about your past, about what you've been working on, about the thoughts in your mind. Take all of it with you and trust and believe that that black hole interiority of your brain can start to grow space for that to also be in there. So you are building interiority when you allow yourself to go through all of that stuff and none of it is left behind at the door saying you can't come.
Thank you. Yeah, it's why do I continue to still be like it's not even the interior that I've built, I've even recorded. I've logged in hundreds of pages of journaling, various like things that I've built, poetry that I've written, like
Hmm.
all sorts of various things. Maybe I have to take it to the bodily level. This is perhaps like the
Hmm.
most core thing. That's sort
Yep.
of what the hurdle is.
Yep.
But then it just feels like what is causing this like self-blindness? Like I feel like I'm
Yeah.
blind to the very work that I'm doing, which
Well,
is
it's
weird.
I think it in my experience with being neurodivergent, I think we do hyper focus on one feature, one part that somebody gave us feedback on. That like, well, maybe if I fix this, but not there's not a lot of feedback that gets you into your embodiment and your embodied wholeness. Like, if I really had to say what kind of feminist I am, I'm like technically I'd be like an embodied neuro feminist because it
Uh-huh.
will go back to this idea that all of the experiences that you've had as a organism connected to your environment can come back into this moment right now and be connected to it, all of them simultaneously, as well as like in specific facing relationships,
Yeah.
like yeah. So if you can go back to the embodiment, you can allow the things that you've been pushing out as like signals of like this isn't what I should work on because somebody told me not to be possibly what it can happen next. It has to. It doesn't mean that it will. It doesn't mean it will be the thing you work on next.
But you're
But
open to it.
you're open
Yeah.
to it. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. This is the actual mature, like responsible thing to do, and that's sort of like
Yeah.
that. But then it actually, if I kind of see this as the only like true work that I have to do, then actually that kind of makes it a bit easier because then I don't have to sort of like go through the work necessarily like immediately right now to try to fix like my life, my parents, like my family's life, like the world, and it can
You've
just
already
focus
done
just on
so
the
much of
embodiment.
that. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
basically what I learned from the teacher I was working with in ballet, and I think this applies very strongly here. Like a really good mentor or teacher is able to pick out one or two things that the student needs to work on, and the other things take care of themselves. And especially with someone who does this like level of introspection and level of like conscientious onboarding of responsibility, right? Like you're trying to onboard the stuff that you actually can do to help other
Mm.
people and yourself, right? You are doing that. So that you don't have to build that as at the same time. You already got that. In fact, if anything, this allows you to use all of that and for it to be free. Right now, that it's not
Right.
free to work at the level that you will when you just work on
Mm.
breath a little bit. Just get your nervous system to be a little bit more
Yeah.
like ready to do careful work, not ready to
Mm.
do everything, which I'm struggling with that too. But a lot of the
It's
everything you've
interesting
already
because
done.
you're right. You must have had a similar thing to me as well, because I guess like this sort of like very insidious thing that was done to, well, that I went through, I know for one is I was always told that, or rather, I was always caught at a moment when I needed to rest, or I was taking on a lot of responsibility, and like maybe more than kids
Yes,
ought to have
yes,
done
yes,
at
yes,
a
you
certain
were.
age.
You were.
But I was always reminded, like, you are like lazy. I told you to do this. You're never doing enough. You never like, and I had that drummed constantly. So like, I always almost, I guess, I've internalized this self paranoia and doubting of like, have I done enough? Like, you know what I mean? But I'm sure that's like an abuser
You've
tactic, right?
yeah,
Of like
and well, and you've
narcissistic.
they maybe were trying to protect you. You and I and a lot of autistic people and a lot of neurodivergent people, we have never done the work that was put on our plate, but we were disabled at that work. That wasn't our work. We were doing and have been doing way more of other kinds of work. And those are often invisible to our society because that kind of work is not the language people speak. It doesn't mean that it isn't there. It means that when people try to talk a bit about it, they'll say intuition or possibly even masculine, feminine, and my head explodes at that one. But what they're trying to talk about is doing is building, in my opinion. That's why I came up with that as the
Right.
framework in the first place. I'm like, what are we really trying to identify? So you have been building, and you
Hmm.
don't have to get better at arriving. You are disabled at it, maybe differently than I am, but you're still disabled at it. And we need to build machines that can get us a little bit to arrive, to coordinate with other people. But the things that you have done and have developed are real, and they are part of what needs to exist in this world. Like if they don't exist, this world will destabilize and we will blow up, like almost literally, if
Yeah.
not literally, right? So so you're doing something not because there's some like cosmic balance that you're writing. You're doing something because you can feel things are collapsing. Okay, so
So feel it's
you're
because I want to, I guess, well, it's not even because I was maybe given this in the past. But I do generally just want to uh give love to myself in some ways and
yeah,
care,
yeah,
because
yeah,
I would do this the same for anybody.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so
That's what I was going to ask you. What does it mean? What does it mean to you to live in a more loving and caring way? For like to give that to yourself. What does it mean
oh
to live that embodied
yeah,
way?
yeah. So okay, so loving and caring yourself is only possible if you can practice doing it with other people because you or not even other people, other objects, other dogs, whatever, it's just something. You have to love something else in order to do it inside of yourself because you know how I was saying you're building interiority. you build the interiority by understanding yourself related to the outside, the exterior.
Yeah.
And then that creates a metaphor for your brain to understand internal states. And those internal states, because the universe, I believe, is recursively stable, will have a resonance with those external conditions that allowed you to create stability. So if you had two facing agents, maybe you were facing a subject matter, a art, an activity, a person, a dog, whatever, and you're both
Yeah.
there with each other, and you feel that behavior, you then need to do that to yourself. So you are kind of a split kind of organism, but that's why I have it like as a three-part thing. So you need to be able to face yourself, and when you face yourself, it's more like a mirror that then remembers itself. So you're a reflection of yourself, but part of you remembers some things and the other part of you remembers the other things, and you need those two parts to face and try to remember each other. So when you're loving yourself, you're remembering yourself. Okay? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so this I also like this I also do. So then I guess the maybe perhaps the root thing then that I would like to ask you is how do we stop what erasing ourselves? Because so I'm doing this sometimes in rebellion, obviously, to my tendencies, to the world itself, or as into society and how they try to kind of make you do stuff. But how do you stop? Well, yeah, how do you stop erasing yourself? How do you stop? Because I seemingly do these things. I have nice days where I do this, and I seemingly remember. I write notes, but again, I'll then go through days where I just don't do this, and like I go back to the tendencies of seemingly doing the opposite, and it's like, why? Why do I do this to myself?
Think of it this way. So put inside of your mind like the whole black hole. So it's a big sphere of like ultra dense conceptual ideas and experiences. Okay.
Singularity.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So that's all possible in there. Okay. You are going to experience yourself as 2 points in that large open space. And when you're not erasing yourself, you're just not facing yourself. You're facing the abyss. So you need both parts of yourself to face each other. If one faces the other and the other one's still moving away, it's just looking at its back, rejecting it. Okay, so if you can,
Yeah.
what's give me an example. Let's bring this out of the abstract into concrete. So what's an activity that you're finding you're struggling to do?
Well, for example, like I mentioned the pull-up bar, right? Like to sort of like do a regular, like I'm supposed to hang, like leaning forward to work on so that like my upper back is sort of more straightened out, and then I have to lean my legs back so that like that little curve that's just above your like the lower part of your back, so that gets straightened up as well. Doing that regularly, like doing that, like obviously really every day I should be doing that. I'm struggling to do that for some reason.
So you need to turn on these two parts of your brain while you're doing it, and this is the split motivation thing. Okay, so in a sense, that's an arrival goal, right? Because you have to go to the pull-up bar, your hands have to reach the pull-up bar, you have to make contact, okay? So that's one sense of it. The other sense of it is like once you're there, get there, notice what's different from where you were before. So you want to remember the sensations in your body in the places that you've arrived at before this. So comparing the grabbing the bar to other things, because that's you remembering. That's asking the part of you that does doing is arriving to talk to you about.
In that
See?
case, with that example, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but could it be also because then in that example, it's pain right at the beginning, and
Yeah.
I'm aware that it doesn't necessarily like hurt or kill me, but still, it does seem like painful things. It's more difficult for me to face that.
Yes, and it will face so that the doing is arriving also will start to bring up counterfactuals like, I wish I had done this when I was like 7 years old. What if I look like this? I saw somebody whose back could do this movement and I can't. Wah
Or
wah.
like I'll do it once, and it's like, oh, my back's not actually straightened up yet.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Instead of my back is somewhat, it's a part of, it's a whole thing for me to care about, and I'm learning how to care about it. And it just takes time to notice more and more and more of it. And part of what your brain is letting you do is be while you're doing it with your doing as arriving aspects, which for me are very flattened, and probably for you, it's not flattened. They're very they can't flatten. They're very like sprawling. Like you'll probably have more memories than the average person while doing this. Like you'll probably have a lot more stuff come up.
Oh
But
yeah, definitely.
yeah. So, but don't fight. Don't turn away from that. That's you. That's not facing. You have to stay with it, and it
Hmm.
will allow you to enjoy it because that's it's I'm not as good at describing this as I would like to be, but I think you're following what I'm saying, which is great.
No,
So
no, you're right because I think the difference is that when I am actually sort of facing it, the difference is that I actually feel that I am active in my own life, like I'm
yeah,
exercising my agency, versus if I'm just passively like, and if I kind of do too much passive, kind of like coasting by, so to speak, like I kind of then start to feel that there's something wrong. Like, yeah.
yeah, and so one of the things like if you start working on an activity that's a physical skill that will get better over time, one of the facing conversations that will come up from your doing as arriving brain is like, man, imagine where I would be if I had done this yesterday or the day before, right? Like today would be even better. You don't go no, you face that too and believe that your brain can build the interiority to like hold that.
See that I almost kind of envision. I've not had too many issues with, or rather because I've started things very late in my life, a lot of stuff,
Which is
and like
good.
I like a lot of
Yeah,
people will be like, yeah, because a lot of people will be like, oh, like don't you think it's too late or whatever, and I'm like, nah, I could die tomorrow. Like I'm just happy that I'm doing the thing that I like right now, like that
exactly.
I'm here for myself.
Exactly. And that's you just it's I don't believe in the idea of like you're letting the thought pass. It's more active than that. You're actually like going in front of the if you think of it as a two
Oh yeah,
points,
yeah.
you
I'm
keep
talking
your
to. Well, I'm
faces,
talking
yeah,
to it.
yeah, keep talking to
Yeah.
it. Keep talking to it and then that's it. Like so you can simplify the dialogue. You don't always have to talk about everything in a facing relationship, right? Like you can just talk about a few things. Like the speed doesn't matter. The size, the scale doesn't matter. It can be a tiny scale, but the shape of it is facing. The shape is determined by those 2 points staying in this dynamic that allows you to have an exchange of memory. So that's what you're trying to do with yourself. And it's like it's I'm gonna have to get better at explaining it, but like you kind of got it. So
No, you
yeah.
explained it perfectly. It's so funny because this connects to like a novel that like really kind of inspired me, or that I still kind of want to revisit. And this is exactly all of what you said in the last half hour. It's like the story is about this kid who's like he's like a I don't know, he's like a no for whatever. I think he went through some grief because a family member died, or no, he went through some grief for some reason, and he was bedridden for like 10 years or whatever, right?
Mm,
And then like he wakes up one day. I mean, I don't know how what this is about, what you'd think of this, because he actually has like a vision or a dream, and like he just feels like he needs to like pick up a sword, right?
yeah.
And he has not had any of this training. He starts, I don't know, at like 18 or whatever. Like, but point is that he just starts doing it every single day. And it's this kind of like embodied thing. And like over the course of the story, right, there's like a lot of talk about like, doing it with sort of like with quote unquote sincerity, like every single day, right? And putting sort of like your wholehearted effort into it
Yeah.
and kind of being present with the body. And like I always kind of wondered why was well, I think I like that story because he kind of wasn't like, he goes to an academy. He obviously got like a lot of bullying and stuff like that
Hmm.
because of his position, but he never was affected by it because he always kept his sort of quote unquote sense of will was like almost like it was almost like metal
Yeah.
because like they talk about how only older people ever get to this level of like concentration and focus, but he was just focusing on his thing. And I guess I kind of almost want to emulate that or aspire to be able to do that as well because it feels like I would be able to deal with the various complexities of the world in a similar fashion, obviously a lot more easier, and to build that over time. And I guess I have been slowly doing that, but it's not followed the progression like in the novel where he kind of it's just been kind of more ups and downs and
Yeah.
random tangents and
Yeah,
turns.
well, and that's because of the world that we're in. It's like trying to build on a trampoline. Like it's way too much velocity. And it's not
Yeah.
fair because people want you to keep moving. They're like, look, we made all of the surfaces trampolines, so you'll never have a problem being stuck. I'm like, what? Like, so it feels bad to have these moments where like you have no equilibrium because you're trying to work on something
Mm.
subtle. But
Or
that's
like you're working
the
in a storm.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's the environment putting this on you. So that's why it's even more important for you to process the environment and what it's doing to you, build the interiority to also virtualize and hold that. And then inside of that, you'll build a sanctuary. Like, okay, I know what that
Hmm.
feels like. What would it feel like to have the right conditions? Now that I really, really,
Right.
really know what the wrong one feels like for me and for humans, what is an idea of the right ones? And you need to trust that you can do that without it
Hmm.
going all wrong or being a mistake. You're not.
Well,
You're
you
not.
gave me an idea,
Yeah. Go ahead.
right?
Mhm.
Just with this, it's like because I believe that like change really in some ways happens again, right, with the interiority, with the interior, and then maybe you're more capable of doing out things out in the world. So then in that case, if there's like an internal storm, perhaps like reflected by the external environment,
Yeah.
then maybe like I need to like I actually need to focus again on like having my own little sanctuary within myself, like personally, like I have something like, well, just to remember to bring myself to like a little house or to make like a
Yeah.
shelter within myself where I can do that, where I can think about like how things would be better if conditions were better,
Exactly.
right,
And you're
once the storm
you're
passes.
connecting things, right? So even though the storm makes you feel like things are disconnected, when you think about one thing, you can connect it to those other things, and you can connect kind of all of it even if it's just for a few moments, and then you can do something else, you can take a break. But it's believing
Hmm.
that you can hold this connected unit that is
Yeah.
yourself and society inside of your mind and give it a safe place to grow because the external environment isn't giving us that. We're making it,
No.
by having these conversations, and we're reality testing how we'll know if something is closer to that or behaves more like that.
Hmm.
But we also need to build it inside the interiority of our minds now. And it feels like a lot of responsibility, but that's what I'm saying. We're adults. This is the time to do it. And also think about when you tried to do it as a kid and how that actually wasn't fair. You can't do this work as a kid. That's not possible. You have to have an
No.
adult brain to do it. And so you can even like include that in your memory that you're accepting. It's like, oh, I remember that I tried to do this as a child. That's beautiful that
Hmm.
I wanted this even so early. But it's got to come at the point where your brain is strong enough to build this openness that it can't explore until you're mature.
And is that just a it's a neurobiological kind of shift, or is there like some sort of like internal thing that you have to like trigger
I
for you
think
to be mature?
yeah. I think it's just age, honestly. Like I really do. I think you're
Oh,
just
so maybe I shouldn't be
yeah.
so hard on myself because
No,
I'm like
you're 27,
I'm
right?
no,
Like you're just
yeah.
entering that window. Your brain is finally stabilized enough that you can start to like explore how the interiority is going to continue to build, like your way of building it. It'll the intensity, the vibrancy of the structures that you have will get more robust. And now it's just like walking into that process of it getting more robust consciously with care. Like it's going to happen. So it's
Here's
a
a
it's
further
a new
question.
phase.
Maybe you know about this. So like,
Mhm.
because I know like it was kind of rough for me the last month per se, and it coincided
Yeah.
with me because of various like clerical errors. I was off of my ADHD meds, right? So I'm also diagnosed with ADHD as well, right?
Yep.
And but then a part of me also felt like should I like sort of try to get back to a period where I'm not on the meds for a while because like I've not read enough of the literature or I can't parse it because I don't know the science currently to know like was I fine? Like, is the meds actually kind of harming me more so? And I'm not saying this because I believe like a counter view that like, oh, it's pharmaceutical evil and stuff like that, but more like when I was a kid, I didn't get a medication. I only started medication when I was like 24, 25.
Hmm.
25 actually is I think when I started. And so it's like, should I not be on the meds? Like, is it like harming my
Yeah.
internal instability?
Um,
Yeah.
I think my experience with it. I do better with ADHD meds, and I'm not even necessarily ADHD. I'm probably CDS. So like there's that. Like if you have different neuro like how do I put this? How your brain regulates certain pathways, like for whatever
Hmm.
reason, it can be helpful to access those pathways with the ADHD medications.
Right, right. But here's the problem, right? How do I, because I often feel like because I don't have like another person who lives with me or like a parent, I cannot know whether something like a medication works for me. Like I've got no frame of reference. How can I like sort of like determine that for myself? I often struggle
Right.
to kind of
Yeah.
know if it
Um,
works or not.
I think this gets back into you need to be in a couple of environments that you can see how it's helping you, and the
Right.
things you want to be doing are feeling more whole, taking
Hmm.
time to breathe. If it feels like you're getting too activated, that's something to consider. But also, humans have a society that requires caffeine at this point, so I don't know. There's arguments there that you're also in situations where you can't work at a slower cognitive tempo. So there's an
See,
issue there.
right.
So you may be
Hmm.
responding intelligently to a demand in your environment too, that it's going to be that or caffeine. So I would also note that possibility.
Hmm.
Um,
Which I
but
don't drink caffeine and I never have.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So there's something to that. Um, I would say, you're well within your rights to test how you feel with and
I
without.
mean,
But
I'm considering going back. Like, I have some leftover like Elvance or Vyvanse or whatever, and going back to like the very like lowest dosage. Like I used to
yeah,
have it because maybe I did feel like I was more able to do, like I probably would be more able to sort of sit down and do that task and like not wake up in the morning with like
yes.
either huge lethargy or very like unstable
Yeah,
interiority
it
or
worked. It
whatever.
works better for me to be on a low dose of Vyvanse personally. Like I've tried it both ways. I just think it's
Right.
very difficult to uh, have enough energy to deal with this problem. And it would be interesting if in a better environment that wasn't true. In this one, I don't know. I think for some of it's not realistic.
Sure.
Okay,
Thank you.
we
Thank you
we
for
are.
everything.
You are so welcome. It's 3:16. I'm gonna stop, but we'll be back at the normal time next week.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye, everyone. Bye, Shadow. Okay, bye anyone listening. If there's anyone here, thank you. We'll be back next week.